Have you ever stopped to think about what's really keeping you grounded right now? It's not your feet. It's not the weight of your body. It's something invisible, silent, and absolutely essential that's working right now without you even realizing it. Gravity is that mysterious force that pulls everything towards the center of the Earth with such perfect consistency that we simply forget it exists. But what if, suddenly, in the blink of an eye, this force simply disappeared? What if gravity stopped working for just a few seconds? The chaos that would ensue would be so immense, so devastating, and so rapid that humanity wouldn't even have time to understand what's happening before everything completely collapses. Get ready, because what you're about to discover will completely change the way you see the world around you and will make you grateful for every second that this invisible force continues to work perfectly. In the first milliseconds after gravity disappears, you wouldn't feel anything different at all. Your body would remain in place, your chair would still be under you, the objects around you would look exactly the same. But then, almost imperceptibly, things would begin to change. The water in your glass would begin to form a perfect sphere floating in the air. The dust particles that normally fall slowly would simply stop midair, frozen in space, as if time had stopped just for them. Your body would begin to feel strangely light, as if you were being inflated from the inside, and then you would realize that your feet are no longer firmly touching the ground. In fact, you would be beginning to float, very slowly at first, rising a few centimeters per second. And here's the part most people don't understand. You wouldn't simply be floating still in the air, like an acute science fiction movie. The Earth is spinning at over 1,600 kilometers per hour at the equator, and without gravity to hold you in place, you would be launched eastward at an absurd speed, as if you had been thrown from a giant, invisible catapult. All people, all cars, all buildings, not firmly anchored to the ground would be hurled horizontally, while simultaneously beginning to slowly rise into the atmosphere. But the real horror wouldn't be you floating or being launched like a projectile. It would be what would happen to the oceans. Think about it. Earth's oceans contain 1.5 trillion cubic kilometers of water, all held in place solely by gravity. Moment that force disappears, all that monstrous amount of water simply ceases to have any reason to stay where it is. The waves would stop breaking because waves depend on gravity to form, but the water wouldn't stop moving. All that gigantic liquid mass would begin to spread upwards and sideways, forming mountain-sized droplets that would float through the atmosphere. Coastal cities would be the first to experience this aquatic apocalypse, with walls of water tens of meters high, simply disintegrating into billions of droplets and flooding everything in a chaotic mess of floating water that would make it impossible to even breathe. You would literally be swimming in the air, surrounded by car-sized bubbles of water floating in all directions. And the worst part is that you wouldn't even be able to tell which direction is up or down, because those concepts would simply cease to exist in a world without gravity. And the buildings. The buildings would be a spectacle of destruction in slow motion. Every human construction has been designed taking gravity into account. The foundations push down. The walls hold the weight from above. Everything is a delicate balance of forces that depend on gravity to make sense. Without it, structures would begin to disintegrate in bizarre and unexpected ways. The tallest buildings would be the first to go, not because they would fall, but because they would dismantle. The steel beams that hold the floors together would begin to separate. The bolts that were tightened, relying on gravity to hold everything together, would simply no longer have a function. Entire floors would separate and begin to float, taking furniture, people, and everything else along in a macabre dance of floating debris. Imagine skyscrapers literally crumbling upwards, with pieces of concrete and glass scattering in all directions like an explosion happening at reduced speed. And it wouldn't just be the tall buildings. Any structure that depends on pillars, beams, or foundations would be doomed. His own house would begin to creak and come apart at the joints. The walls would pull away from the ceiling. The ceiling would begin to slowly rise, while everything inside the house floated together in an absolute mess of loose objects. Now let's talk about something almost no one considers, but that would be absolutely lethal. The atmosphere. The air you breathe, that invisible envelope of oxygen and nitrogen that surrounds our planet, is only here Because of gravity. It is gravity that keeps all those trillions of tons of gases pressed against the Earth's surface, creating the atmospheric pressure that allows our lungs to function and water to remain liquid. The instant gravity disappears, the entire atmosphere begins to expand into space. It wouldn't be instantaneous, but it would be fast. The air molecules that were previously pushed down by gravity would suddenly have no force holding them back and would begin to spread in all directions, seeking to occupy all available space. In a matter of minutes, atmospheric pressure would begin to drop drastically. Your eardrums would burst with the change in pressure, just like what happens on an airplane, but infinitely worse and faster. Breathing would become increasingly difficult because there simply wouldn't be enough air around you. And here's the cruel detail. You wouldn't die instantly. You would spend a few agonizing minutes trying to breathe increasingly thin air while floating uncontrollably, surrounded by debris and water, watching the sky grow darker and darker as the atmosphere escapes into the vacuum of space. But wait, there's more, and it's even worse. Earth isn't a solid billiard ball floating in space. It's a geologically active planet with a molten iron core spinning at its center, creating the magnetic field that protects us from deadly solar radiation. Tectonic plates are in constant motion, pushing against each other, separating and sliding beneath one another, all in a balance maintained by gravity. Without gravity, Earth's core would lose the pressure that keeps it compact and would begin to expand. The tectonic plates, held in place by immense gravitational forces, would begin to shift in chaotic and unpredictable ways. Earthquakes of magnitudes, not even on the Richter scale, would begin to occur simultaneously everywhere on the planet. Volcanoes that have been dormant for millennia would erupt violently because the magma trapped under pressure underground would suddenly no longer have the weight of the Earth's crust pushing it down. Entire mountains would begin to disintegrate, not because they would fall, but because the internal structure that holds them up simply wouldn't make sense without gravity. The very shape of the Earth would begin to change, ceasing to be a sphere flattened at the poles and becoming something closer to a perfect sphere. And in the process of this transformation, entire continents would be torn apart and reshaped on a scale of destruction that makes any natural disaster in human history seem like child's play. And what about the other planets? Oh yes, because gravity doesn't only affect Earth. It's the glue that keeps the entire solar system functioning like a perfectly synchronized Swiss watch. The moon orbits Earth because Earth's gravity constantly pulls on it, creating that orbital dance that produces the tides and stabilizes our planet's axis of rotation. Without gravity, the moon would simply fly off in a straight line through space. Following the orbital speed it had at the moment, gravity disappeared, which is an impressive 3,600 kilometers per hour. Earth would also no longer orbit the sun. It would shoot off on a random tangent, carrying with it the floating debris of what was once a civilization. All the planets in the solar system would do the same, transforming our organized solar system into an explosion of planets going in all directions like billiard balls. After the first shot, and it's not just our solar system, all galaxies are held together by gravity. Stars orbit the galactic center because of gravity. Even the universe itself has its large-scale structure determined by gravity. If gravity simply ceased to exist, the entire universe would begin to disintegrate on a scale that the human brain can barely comprehend. But let's get back to you, floating in what remains of Earth's atmosphere, because that's where things get really personal and terrifying. Your body has been designed by evolution over billions of years to function perfectly under the constant influence of gravity. Your heart pumps blood upward against gravity to feed your brain. Your bones are dense and strong because they need to support your weight. Your muscles are calibrated to move your body in an environment where weight exists. Without gravity, all of that ceases to make sense. The blood that should be being pulled down your legs suddenly begins to pool in your head and chest, causing your face to swell and your eyes to bloodshot. You would feel a horrible pressure in your head, as if your skull were about to explode, while your legs turn pale and cold from lack of circulation. Your vestibular system, that part of the inner ear that tells you where the ground is and helps you maintain your balance, would simply malfunction because there would no longer be a constant down to use as a reference. You would feel overwhelming nausea, completely lose your sense of spatial orientation, and probably vomit, which, without gravity, means you would be surrounded by floating droplets of your own vomit that would stick to you and everything around you. And even if you somehow managed to survive the first few minutes of absolute chaos, your body would begin to deteriorate rapidly because the muscles and bones that no longer have to fight against gravity would begin to atrophy at an alarming rate, much faster than what happens to astronauts on the International Space Station. Because there they at least exercise and have support equipment. The most terrifying truth about all of this is that there is absolutely nothing we could do to prepare for or survive such an event. There is no bunker strong enough, no technology advanced enough, no evacuation plan that will work when the very physics of the universe decides to stop cooperating. And you know what's even crazier? Gravity is literally the weakest of the four fundamental forces of nature. It is infinitely weaker than the electromagnetic force, the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force. The only reason gravity seems so powerful is because it acts on massive scales, and because, unlike the other forces, it never cancels itself out. It only accumulates. Every atom on planet Earth is pulling every atom in your body toward the center of the planet. And the sum of all these trillions and trillions of tiny pulls is what we call weight. It's incredible to think that the weakest force in the universe is the one that literally keeps our existence possible, that organizes entire galaxies, and that determines the fate of absolutely everything that exists. Without it, the very concept of structure ceases to exist. Everything becomes chaos. Everything turns into a primordial soup of particles floating randomly through the vacuum of space. So now that you know this absolutely terrifying truth about gravity, how about leaving a comment telling us what the scariest part was for you? Was it thinking about floating oceans? Was it imagining the atmosphere escaping? Or was it realizing that your own body would disintegrate? Tell me below, because I really want to know what went through your head while you imagined this apocalyptic scenario. And since you've made it this far and clearly enjoy discovering disturbing truths about the universe, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any new videos where we explore these mind-blowing curiosities. And leave a like, because it really helps the channel grow and bring more and more of this kind of content that you love. And it doesn't stop here. Click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now because there are more incredible curiosities that will leave you speechless and make you question absolutely everything about the reality you thought you knew.